Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about the divide in frontend, or if there is a divide in frontend. So let's get into it. So I had a question yesterday where someone reached out and asked basically, Frederick, do you think that there is a divide in the frontend community today? And what do you think about that? And what do you think about this term that some people are using as, what's the term? UX engineer or something like that. So we've touched on this a few times as well, but hey, the classics never die, so let's try to define this once again, and let's try to share my thoughts, or I will try to share my thoughts on this topic. So I've had this question a few times, like what is a front-end developer? What is a web designer? And like trying to make this distinction, because quite a lot of people have well, it depends on how you look at it, because the thing is that being unclear on what the term front-end developer means today and what a web designer does is just going to hurt. Most commonly, it doesn't affect me. It's never affected me, and it's never probably going to. But what it does is that this ambiguity between the two and having a poor understanding of what's most commonly associated with each role is going to simply hurt the people who are trying to get a job as whichever. So basically what I claim is that I do believe that there is a divide today, and the divide is between programmers and designers. Now what I argue here is that this may not have always been so. It might have been the case that, I know for a fact that this has been the case for quite some time, and in certain areas it's still sort of relevant. But so you see, the trend that we see today is that IT companies want more and more from less and less people. We are moving from a specialist approach to solving problems, to having people with more advanced tooling who are more generalists, if you will. We are getting, as I said, you're synchronizing more responsibilities into the same role. And the thing about that is, this has happened many times before. If we look at something like DevOps as an example, so a while back it was pretty much standard practice or common practice to have an operations team or an operations person dedicated to handling everything that has to do with infrastructure. But today that's simply not the trend that we're seeing. We're seeing that through Kubernetes and Docker and other tools such as that, we can actually put that responsibility on the developers as well, cutting cost and things of this nature, which is a very positive thing for quite a lot of companies. And this trend is continuing. It's not just that's the red thread through all of this. And you see, when we talk about a web designer, that is a very specific role. That is, I will argue, a specialist's role, because the thing is, a web designer is an individual, if we just define it as an individual who is first and foremost a designer. That is their focus. They are a designer. They are the sort of person that you talk to if you want to create a beautiful UI, you want to have a great user experience, accessibility, things of this nature. That is the focus. But they do have the skills, depending on how you define it, to actually implement that UI for some whatever client we're talking about. So having a knowledge of HTML, CSS, and some basic JavaScript and so forth, that is a web designer. But as I said, I cannot state this enough. The focus of such an individual is the design process. And what we're seeing today is simply that companies are moving away from having a individual as a single individual who is specialized in the UI in that manner. And they're moving towards having designers who are more cross-functional than that. They're looking for UX designers, people who actually do research, they actually just do the actual artboards and mockups and so forth. And these designers are usually cross-functional within an IT team. In other words, they're not just supporting the development, they're supporting sales, they're supporting other stakeholders with graphics and artboards and so forth, because it's a bigger topic. Design is much more cross-functional than that you're simply doing the UI, right? And that is the trend that at least I can see, and from being at a few companies at this point, I can see that they are all doing the same thing. And I'm not saying that every company on earth is doing this, but that is the trend that I'm seeing. So what does this actually mean? Well, it basically means that whoever feels because what this creates is a situation where some people feel as if, what's a front-end developer then? Well, a front-end developer is a programmer. That's what I see. That's what people are looking for. I've said this 100 times. I don't care what you want to call yourself. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if you call yourself a UX engineer, a front-end developer. You can call yourself whatever you want. What I think is important, though, is that we talk about what most companies actually expect you to be when you call yourself a front-end developer. Because when they are asking for a front-end developer, if you have a look at the job postings, they most commonly are focusing on the programming skills. And that's the thing that is important here. That's where the divide actually happens. Because front-end development is where design and development meets. That exact point. And as I've said, we're trying to more and more to create roles within IT that are more general than that. That you're not going to hire, today, as I said, it's much more common that you hire a front-end developer with the programming skills and a good understanding of these UI technologies, who can actually not only implement it, but they can do that in a very efficient manner and scale these applications. Since the UI is actually getting more and more complicated, it's extremely hard to find a web designer who has the sort of raw coding skills that might be required. Rather very often is required to build an application of a fair amount of complexity. So basically what's happening is that this doesn't sit all that well with some people who feel that, they're just as good as any front-end developer. But the problem is that these are also the people that all the front-end developers who contact me are usually people that I can very clearly see immediately that they are, and talk about having issues with being hired and employment and so forth. The people who usually have an issue are the people who don't accept this, that as a front-end developer, when a company hires you, what they're most interested in is your coding skills. It's great if you know design, it's great if you're pretty good at it, but remember, if their work structure usually entails that they hire dedicated designers to do this sort of thing, they actually produce this sort of thing. Your focus as the front-end developer is to actually make a really great implementation of these mock-ups and these designs, right? So, this has happened many times before. You can look at the DBA profession. It's the same principle. You used to have a dedicated DBA person, and today they're all but extinct. Where people are, once again, you're in the similar way to the DevOps organization, in the DevOps movement. You're moving and centralizing more responsibilities and more work through better tooling onto the developers. And so this role of being a web designer really, it still has a place. There are still companies where you can actually do this sort of work, but it's becoming less common to have that sort of role within larger organizations and real IT companies and so forth. So this term that the subscriber was asking about, the UX design engineer, I'm starting to me, that is it's just a rebranding of web designer in my world. That is what it is. It represents a rebranding where you are basically trying to shim in the semantics of the same role practically, but you need to redefine it somehow so that you can still argue that you still have a relevancy, because for some reason it's hard. I just don't get it, because the designers that I know that do the best, that still have an interest in web development, are the people who brand themselves as designers, but they do have some coding skills. You see the conversation flips. It's not the other way around. They're not trying to claim that they are programmers with design skills, because it's very easy to spot such an individual to be if they only have basic coding skills, it's very unlikely that they will get a job unless they're extremely talented or they work in a very forgiving environment. But when it comes to saying that you're a UX engineer, to me, it's just a rebranding, and I'm not a big fan of rebranding. And the reason why I'm not a big, I mean, it doesn't have to just to do with this. It has, I mean, if you're calling yourself a testing engineer or a QA engineer, whatever, to me that is the same thing. Like, you're basically just hijacking the term engineer and putting it on a role to make it to make whoever's listening to you feel as, oh, this is a role that requires some type of brains, right? And I don't think that's a good thing. Rebranding things like that is a very poor practice that I dislike quite a lot, especially because basically what it does is that it takes the term engineer and it dilutes it down to just meaning, hey, you're a smart person. So what I want you to take away from this is that I do believe that, yes, there is a divide in front-end today, and I think that divide is between designers and programmers. There is this crossover section where these two professions meet, and I think that for your own sake, make sure that you know which side of the fence you are on, because if you want to be a designer, you're going to have to brand yourself in one and focus on one way of working, if you will, one path. And if you want to be a programmer first and foremost, usually being a front-end developer is the term that people use for you. That's what they commonly do. And that entails a focus on programming and a fairly deep understanding of programming. So being like 50-50 is usually not feasible unless you're extremely good at what you're doing or if you're working in a very forgiving environment. So just have that with you, because trust me, it will make finding jobs and things of this nature and avoiding all of these issues where you just don't get contacted a lot easier. So yeah, it's for your sake, not mine. Have a great day.